innovative, we disrupt the market, we seek to grow on a quarterly basis and give back to future generations.
Yeah, you're just teaching me, dropping tons of knowledge. Forever grateful.
And that's where companies fail a lot of times. It's that the companies aren't communicating their way correctly.
Welcome back to the Mission Control Podcast. It's your boy Mike Stearns with Ascend Digital Agency. This episode's probably brought to you by Roofr. If you need instant roof measurements or clean and pristine proposals to get out to your prospects, hit up the team over at Roofr. Dr. Jessica Stahl, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing so good. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm super excited to be talking with you for the next hour.
It might be a little bit more than an hour, but I'm equally excited for the conversation, whether it's 10 minutes or 3 hours. We'll try to keep it to an hour, though. Wow, I've never had a doctor on my podcast before.
Don't set the bar too high.
That's right, this is amazing. Yeah. So, you recently got some really good news. We're going to get into who you are and what you do, but let's talk about the good news real quick. What is the good news? Tell everybody about it.
Yeah, so I recently signed an agreement with GAF, and I'm going to be representing them at different functions across the country. It's called the Expert Value Speaker Series, and we go to conferences like the Wealth Builder Conference for all the GAF users and do panel discussions and really tried to bring value to all of the contractors that use their product.
That's so amazing. I'm so happy for you. Congratulations.
Yeah, so there's about 12 of us in the country right now that are sponsored by GAF. So it was a really big deal. I mean, they put you through so many interviews. I feel like I probably had 5 different interviews and had to submit an electronic press kit and every topic I could speak on with bullet pointed list. And I mean, then I had a group of 7 people that I presented to, and they're rapid fire questions at the end. So it was a really long process, but it was definitely well worth it. So I start in a couple days, and I can't wait to just be a part of that.
An elite group of 12 there. That's quite amazing. I'll be at the Wealth Builder Conference. I think it's in San Antonio. Is that right?
Yeah, I know it's in Texas.
So look forward to seeing you there. So you had a panel interview? Yeah, I had one of those when I was 23. And I think it was more specifically a stress panel. Because every time I'd go to start an answer, someone would interrupt me, and I'm after the 4th or 5th time, this was before I knew that this was a technique. I'm what do you guys want to do here? I'm you keep asking me questions, you're interrupting me every step of the way. I don't know how to answer you if you won't allow me to communicate, right? And oddly enough, I didn't get the job. So I'm glad that you fared much better than I did in my panel interview. Yeah, that's so amazing. Wow, that's dope. So let's talk about the journey, who you are, how you got to where you are. I mean, we're gonna have a lot of fun here. So you're a doctor of what?
I'm an industrial organizational psychologist, and that's a lot of syllables. So a lot of times I'll just say I'm an organizational psychologist because it just makes it easier for people to remember. And so that's the scientific study of people at work. That's what organizational psychology means. So when people think I'm a psychologist, they think diagnosing mental issues, and in roofing, everyone's oh, can you prescribe medication? They're oh, we need some Adderall. So it's they think that I'm prescribed medication, or I have a couch where people tell me all their problems, and it's a lot different than that. So I'm really only working with a subset of behaviors, and that's people at work. I guess they call it normal functioning human behavior, but I feel with the workforce, just even after COVID, there's not normal functioning anymore.
How long have you been, when did you get your doctorate?
So I graduated in 2015 with my
Okay.
PhD.
Have you?
Yeah. I was in school for 10 years.
So I
I
was in
know.
school for 8, but it was only to get a bachelor's degree. I did part time because I swear to God, I had my daughter when I was young, so it was like work full time, school part time, be a father. So
Okay.
yeah, I can't imagine being in school full time for 10 years. God bless you. Um, so did you always only work in roofing or contracting, or when you got out of school, did you work in other industries?
Yeah, so I've been in roofing. It depends on how you want to slice it up. So, like, working in roofing, using like my degree and my knowledge, I started my company 2.5 years ago. But I was born into a contracting family, so I guess we could say 35 years of
There you
contracting
go.
experience because that's kind of like all I've ever known growing up. I would like ask my parents for advice. Oh, like I don't know, I'm so stressed about this college test, or I don't know how to work in corporate. And they're like, oh, well, just start your own business. Like, school's for the birds. Um, so I've been in contracting and around contractors my whole life. And so I feel like the school, being in school for 10 years and having the background that I do creates this unique position for me to help the roofing
Yeah.
industry. Just kind of like everything has aligned to bring me here.
Yeah, I like that. So we do marketing and advertising websites and stuff, and I would entirely spin that as 35 years of experience in the roofing industry if I'm making a website for you. So forward thinking, very well done, way to be aware. Uh, I was, so did you, I was curious because you'd mentioned you graduated in 15 and like the study of people at work, and I would be interested in like, how has that changed since COVID? Not specific to roofers, but like in other industries, like how has like the ability to assess been impacted and how people function at work? Like that's really intriguing to me.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the first thing is that people are more aware and are paying more attention to how people are interacting at work. And I think a large part of that is because people have to. We call it like the great resignation after COVID, where 30% more independent contractors came to light. So that's like 30% less in the workforce. And people have endless opportunities of where to work. So now there's a lot more emphasis on are our people happy? How can we retain them? How can we attract the best people? So I think that's like where the big shift is that people are paying attention now. I think the other big shift is just wanting increased flexibility. And that's been an upward trend
Yeah.
before COVID happened. Just wanting to be able to work from home and having more independence. And I feel like, roofing sales are excellent to be able to provide that to people. And when I'm doing recruiting, that's one of the main selling points that I use to get people to leave a corporate job to come to roofing is that sense of flexibility and independence, because that's what COVID has created, are those two drives.
Huh. So they leave corporate. They love the allure of that flexibility, that independence. How does that correlate to like the quality of the salesperson that you're seeing come through the doors?
Yeah. So, I mean, we recruit, it really depends on the company strategy of who they want to recruit. Some people only want to recruit seasoned roofing sales reps. I like to take people with corporate or other type of sales experience, not necessarily in roofing, and bring them into roofing. And it, the success of them is dependent on how structured the company is. Like, even from that first impression of having the right hiring process, do you look dysfunctional in the hiring process? Are you paying at market value? Do you have a competitive commission structure, and can you offer benefits like health, vision, and dental, because people are going to want that? Do you have an onboarding process? Do you have performance management check-ins? So you have to be running your roofing company with a lot of structure to be able to keep and even attract right people, those professional sales reps from the jump. And that's what I really say is we want professional salespeople, not just like anybody off the street that's, it's a 1099 contractor, so we'll just throw them out in the field and see what happens. But to be really more intentional and have the level of professionalism that you want.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I did. I put a question out to one of the Facebook groups, I don't know, maybe 6 months or a year ago. Like, who do you guys prefer to hire? I've never done roofing sales, but I've done sales, and I did sales for a long time. And what I found was, like, usually, like, there were some people that would come in and assimilate to a culture and thrive, and they were already a rock star elsewhere in the industry. But what I found more often was, like, in that instance, you would get somebody who's entitled and is not coachable, right? And they would rock the boat, and they would just tear apart the fibers of what culture was there, just by virtue of not, I don't want to say falling in line, but really, like, not following the vision of the company. And then there was, like, the other people that were newer to sales or had some sales experience, but in an adjacent industry or something. One guy worked at, like, Delta Sonic, which is a car washing place, right? And, like, if you think about it,
Yeah.
right, you're making $4 in commission for selling, a car wax, right? And, like, your top end in that position is what, like 50, 60K, maybe, like, I mean, at best.
Right.
If you can take somebody who has that drive and that work ethic, especially in the Northeast, who would stand out in the fucking 3-degree weather in the winter and sell fucking wheel wet to people for $2 a pop, like, I feel like, like, somebody told me they had a really good experience recruiting that way. And so it was always interesting to me. As far as like what you had talked about, as far as like the sales rep who knows what they're doing, doesn't have as much experience in that specific industry, and kind of bringing them in, because like they probably don't have those bad habits that somebody who's seasoned might. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that is definitely one way to look at it, and I do like recruiting people from outside the industry. But I think it is like for newer companies that are starting off to have somebody with experience to come in and help lead that team, not necessarily in a sales manager capacity, but a seasoned rep to kind of be a leader in that company, I think is a really smart strategy. I think that if companies are going to be bringing in people from the outside, then they have to communicate like the mission, the vision, and the culture from the jump. And that's where companies fail a lot of times. It's not that people are dead set on their own ways, it's that the companies aren't communicating their way correctly. There's no like values that are outlined. There's no like we have like a culture plan is what we do for companies, that each quarter we are rallying around our core values, doing activities and events and awards. So without that consistent reiteration of the values and the vision, it'll get lost, and strong leaders will come in with their own. So that's where people are like, oh, we just don't want any seasoned reps because they're all the same. It's like, no, but if you're going to bring those people in, you have to give them guidance on how to act, and that's culture.
I love that. I love that insight. So context is important, for sure, right? And you have to lead, which seems pretty intuitive, but I think, like, as you kind of stated, like, I don't know, what percentage of, if you had to put a number to it, what percentage of companies do a very good job proactively leading their company in a way that's best going to suit them?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that we first have to break down what is leadership to understand if companies are effective at it. And I think there's a couple parts to that. So one is like this visionary leadership of teaching people, the vision, where the company's going, and getting them inspired to be on board with that. So like this inspirational part of leadership. And I think that's super important. But the other part is the accountability in leadership. And I think that's more where roofing companies are falling apart. Is that we're focusing on leadership, like the rah-rah, like the inspiration, which you absolutely have to have, but it's not followed up with accountability. So like tracking key performance indicators and having your roles and responsibilities mapped out, to having your systems documented. That's also part of leadership, and that part tends to get lost. So when you're asking me, how great or what percentage of companies are great leaders, I would say that only about 20% have it right on the system side of things, on the accountability side of things.
That's an amazing distinction to make, and we just talked about this on a recent episode. Is like it's not enough to acknowledge that you need something and then to create a system or a process for it. Like there has to be oversight, right, in order to make sure that people are doing the things that are intended to be accomplished by virtue of that system or process. There has to be that accountability. And that's why it's our number one core value is accountability here at Ascend. I feel like it's a scarce commodity, accountability. But yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Very good. So you had mentioned bringing in for a newer company a salesperson, a seasoned salesperson, what value that would bring. So I recently had a client, and they were doing all the sales themselves, and they were looking for a salesperson unsuccessfully, turned over a lot of rocks, and they were kind of getting to their wits' end. And then they were looking at bringing in a sales manager, and it kind of felt like a chicken and egg type of situation, because they're like, do I bring in a sales manager to recruit salespeople that's going to fall in line with what they have envisioned for their team, or do I bring in a salesperson knowing that I'm not a good sales leader, and try to bring them up to speed to get them out in the field and be productive? It was one of those things where I got put in a situation. I'm like, man, I don't feel like I have a great answer for this question. So let's talk about it. What would be your take on that?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, because what I see a lot of times is that roofing company owners were former sales reps at other companies. So that most of the time, the roofing company owner is the sales expert. So having somebody that doesn't have the sales experience that wants to start a roofing company is much more rare. So, I mean, in that case, like we have one client that was in that situation where he was more on the production side and had done like roofing himself, like what we would typically think of subcontract labor. He was actually doing that, and he had a partner at that time and brought in a partner to run the sales side of things. So, I mean, in that case, if there's got to be a sales manager, and most of the time the sales manager is also the owner. But if the owner can't be the sales manager, then there's got to be some type of leadership. Leadership would come first in that situation. Leadership always comes first. But it's not necessarily you go out and hire a sales manager right away. It could be that you're hiring a seasoned rep and you groom him and build him into a sales manager as you bring on people. Usually a sales manager is going to come with some type of base salary. For new companies, they can't often afford that. So that's where a career path comes in. And that's what we build out for companies is, okay, you're going to start as a senior sales rep. Once you bring 3 people on, you're going to move to team lead. Once we bring 5 people on, you're going to be the sales manager. So having those incentives built in that way.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because I think not only in roofing, I think in my experience in like corporate America, for instance, like that's not something that is emphasized, right? Like even if I'm taking an entry-level position, I want to know that there's going to be opportunity for me to grow into something more. Like this is my floor, not my ceiling type situation. And if you're left to wonder what that is, and there's doubt in someone's mind when they're in that type of position, the likelihood, I feel like, of retaining them is drastically decreased as the days go on, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's 2 reasons why people would pick a company. And the number one is development. They want to know that they're going to be developed. And they want to have a clear path for success. And then the second one is a sense of purpose. So that's where your mission, vision, values come in. So for your knowing how you're going to advance in the company, a career path means that how long is it going to take me to get there? How often am I going to get pay increases? What are the specific behaviors or skills to master before I can get promoted? Is there anything outside of my control that would prevent me from getting promoted? Like they want to know all of these things up front, and that saves people from coming to the boss every month, oh, I need to get a raise or I'm leaving. And that's like can be like definitely a
Sure.
manipulation tactic. But if you have the expectations written out front and saying no, you have to pass this quiz, or you have to, get a 75% on your performance review, or whatever it is, you have to get 50 Google reviews, then you have criteria, and then it's no longer an emotional manipulation. I think that's super important.
Yeah, people don't like to feel manipulated, do they?
Well, it can put people in a tough spot, and then you're like, well, I don't want to lose my top salesperson, so I'm going to go ahead and give him an increase in commission. But then you have all the other salespeople that are like, oh, well, we want an increase in commission. And then I have a client where that started happening, and then the profit margins of the company go way down, and there becomes like a major cash flow issue.
Can you hire a salesperson just with a flat salary if you create the right environment?
Mm, typically, like the personality characteristics that make someone great at sales wants like higher
Mm-hmm.
dopamine levels. They like thrive on this competition, this gratification, the more and more and more. Like those typically are people that are drawn to sales positions, true sales
Sure.
positions. So I don't know anybody that would be happy, like a true salesperson be happy with just a base salary. I can't see that working. However, you have like your customer experience people, like customer management, and a lot of companies are moving to like an inside and outside sales rep partnership. So you have like your inside sales people that are doing like customer relations, business development type things, managing, the customer relationship throughout the sales cycle. Like if we want to call that sales, then yes, that can be more of your flat salary. But I've never seen it successfully like given just like a flat salary. Have you
I
seen that?
haven't, but I've always like theorized with myself, like, okay, so 100% your people that are going to be able to produce the most in sales are going to be, they're going to have an ego, they're going to be competitive, right? They're going to have that drive, they're going to want that dopamine, and there's probably some other things that come along with that aren't great. I can speak from experience on that, but like those are typically going to be characteristics common among really high performers. But it's like, okay, well, what if I take, three people that are just average, right? And they'll come in and they'll do their job and create opportunities and they'll follow a process. Can I get,
Mm-hmm.
what I would out of one person with three and still be in the same ballpark and maybe create a better culture? Maybe create some more predictability within my company. Again, just something I've always played
Mm-hmm.
with in my mind. I don't know how viable it would be. Might be stupid. I've said stupid shit before. It's fine.
No, I don't think it's stupid. I think if you have the expectations like put in place, like this is like the quota for the month. If you want to stay on salary, I think that could be fine. Um, yeah, because there's like another type of salesperson that is more into like relationship selling that wants that
Mhm.
predictability. So I can see how that could be effective. It would just need to be structured. There has to be clear
Sure.
performance things because the main risk is that now it's a cash flow issue and they're not producing. So if you can like have them sign something that's like you're agreeing to sell this much volume for this much amount, it's almost like a draw system in a way.
Okay. I like it. So here's what we're gonna do.
And I've seen
The
that work.
draw. I said, so here's what
What?
we're gonna do. We're gonna start a roofing company, and we're gonna hire three people on salary with these clear expectations. And this is gonna be our study to see if this is actually implementable. And then if it works, we're gonna sell the company and the
Yeah.
system. It's gonna be great.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I would want to do that in roofing. I don't know that that's like the market to
Fair
do that.
enough.
I mean, maybe in marketing or other industries, but I mean, I wouldn't want to.
All right, I'll find a different business partner then.
I don't think it. Or you, or you like do a base salary for sure. That's like a lot of companies, roofing companies have a base salary with like smaller commission overrides, like 1 or 2% of the gross with the with a larger base salary. I've seen that work successfully.
Interesting.
But yeah, there's got to be like incentives for sales. That's like the whole nature of like the hunting, the developing relationships, like the motivation behind that.
I love capitalism. So, what is the most frequently made mistake when a roofing contractor is trying to recruit talent that you see?
Well, first, like a lot of people think that they have a recruiting problem when in fact it's a retention problem. Because if they retained all of the good people, they wouldn't be having recruiting issues in the first place. So I think it's kind of like going back to the chicken or egg scenario. It's like recruiting is typically like the consequence of lack of retention. So you have like your initial recruiting processes, of course, but then it's now a revolving door, and things fall apart with that. So what I see contractors doing is they build a process thinking that they're going to hire people that aren't going to stay. So they're like making this process efficient to hire ineffective people. So a lot of times like it's a 10-to-1 ratio to hire 10 reps to get one great one. So they're building this really efficient process. So like doing group interviews, I never recommend doing that.
Because I would hate that. Like that. I can't imagine like going in for an interview somewhere and there being 6 other people with me. It's like, okay, here's your interview. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah. So, but the reason they have to do those group interviews is because they're starting with a wide pool of unqualified talent that they're going to hire. So they're essentially building the system for people to fail in because they've been burnt so many times in the past. So let's just do it as efficiently as possible because no one's going to stay anyway. So the mentality really has to shift to quality over quantity. And so what we recommend is building engagement from the jump, from that first screening call, to actually be on the phone with them, either the owner or the person responsible for recruiting, to not just send an email like, thank you for applying, we'll get back to you. But it's like within 24 to 48 hours, like be on the phone with that person, building engagement. That's all the time you have to make a connection, because top talent has 5 interviews within the first week. So a lot of people are like, oh, that takes so much time, or we're not going to put the effort in, and somebody should want to work here and prove themselves to us. And that's all that is ego, because if you're on a job board, you are a number right now, just like the candidate is a number. There's no relationship there. So to differentiate yourself, you've got to treat it just like you would a potential customer. You don't just, if a lead comes in, you don't just email them, you call them. Same with a great applicant comes in. You don't just send them a message, you call them and build engagement right then. That's like the biggest thing, is creating a relationship from the jump. That's like if I could give one takeaway for recruiting, is building the relationship on the phone as soon as possible.
That's a really good way to put it, right? Like, you wouldn't message the guy that is calling you and just left a message saying he wants you to come put a roof on now. Are you going to send him a text or an email? No, you're going to pick up the phone, call him, get him scheduled. Well, hopefully you didn't miss the call. Like, that would be your first mistake. But if you did, you would make that phone call and build that relationship and get the opportunity. Couldn't have said it better myself. Amazing. And I like what you put out there as far as like, instead of like fixing the retention problem and fighting attrition, right? We're going to create an inefficient process. We're going to acquiesce to the fact that we're going to have to hire a bunch of people and fire a bunch of people, and that is what it is. And it's like, we had talked about
Right.
a couple days ago, I'm like, in golf, if you play with a slice, it means that, like, that the ball's going to hook right when you hit it, so you're going to aim left and hope to end in the fairway. And, like, that's how I play a lot of things in life. I've never fixed my slice, because what you should do is fix the problem so that you could just go up to the tee box, aim straight, and hit the goddamn ball straight. So they're kind of playing with their slice if they're creating that inefficient process to try to get the best outcome in, a shitty situation. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it needs to have structure, just like you have a ton of structure when you're dealing with customers, or people should. It's the same as with people. So, like having a screening process that you're getting to know applicants, like a 15-minute screening call, that you can actually weed out the bottom 30 to 40% so you don't waste any time in interviews. A lot of companies don't have that. They just bring everybody into a group interview. So, you've got to protect your time as well, and that's where the screening process comes into place. So asking the right questions to weed out the bottom 30 to 40%. And I built like the process on how to do that for roofing, and it works super effectively. Screening is not deciding who's going to be the most qualified, it's deciding who's going to be the most unqualified. Right, yeah. The least
I love
qualified.
that. You got to tell me, what's your favorite question in, like, when you're weeding people out? What's the favorite question and why?
Yeah. So, I mean, I always start with looking over their resume and looking for consistency in jobs. So, I like to ask, why they have like gaps in their resume, or why they've jumped from job to job, and let them explain that. So you're going to get a really good feel on somebody's reliability. And I feel like in roofing, that's super important, is to have reliable talent. So you can assume that if somebody's been at, a job for 3 months, job for 2 months, a job for 4 months, then they're going to do the same thing to you, and you're going to waste time training them, and they're going to leave. So I like to look at the job history, and then I like to just ask them what their career goals are and see if they align with the position. So if they're telling you things like, I like a steady environment, I like to, just work by myself, and like a slower pace type position, then that's not going to be a sales rep, like right off the bat. That someone's not going to thrive in the fast paced like team setting like they are. So listening to like the fit for the position, also giving them information about what the job entails before they get to the interview. So letting them know that door knocking is part of the job, letting them know that like commission is part of the job. So not just like kind of doing like weaseling around the facts of the job, but being able to present them strategically so that you're not wasting anybody's time. I think that's really important too.
Yeah, that's smart. That makes a lot of sense. Is there such a thing as over qualifying in that first step, to where you're unintentionally weeding out 60%, and maybe that 20-30% in the middle shouldn't have been vetted so thoroughly to where you lost the opportunity to get an interview with them?
If like the first initial contact is more than 15 minutes, then you're pretty much going into an interview, like a regular interview. It's no longer a screening interview. In a screening interview, you're making sure that, okay, this person is willing and able to get on a roof. This person is close enough to the office to make the meetings, like the minimum criteria, and they seem professional. If you're going into more questions of, tell me about a time when you faced a challenge at work and how did you overcome it, tell me a time about a difficult coworker, that's no longer a screening interview. That is a regular interview. So I don't recommend going into a regular interview on the first meeting. That's kind of like you're going on a first date and you're building a relationship with somebody, and then you just bring like a checklist, like, do you want to have kids?
When do you want to get married?
Like, how often do you like to? Yeah, yeah. So it's like you're like building a relationship, and those things take time. So like coming in hot with all the information and all the questions right off the bat is not a smart decision.
That's an amazing point, because I could see like it kind of accidentally happening, right? Like you're excited, you've got somebody who's got you're asking the screening questions and they got all the right answers, so it just evolves into, all right, well, let's keep talking. But that essence of time that has to be present in order to help develop that relationship, it comes back to structure and awareness, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've developed like a screening guide. So it's 8 or 9 questions that you need to ask. And then there's a scoring sheet on it for level of professionalism, level of skill fit, and level of enthusiasm for the job. So it's no more thought has to be made by people that use our process. You just ask the questions and rate them. If they pass, you schedule them for an interview. Very structured. Why this helps so much is like writing things down is because oftentimes as a company grows, the person doing the screening interview and the person doing the actual interview are not the same people. So there's got to be communication between the two of them.
I love that. It's so good.
You're smiling. I hope I'm.
No, I mean,
I hope I'm like.
You are, right? And I mean, anyone who's owned a business has likely been through like nightmares as far as trying to hire. And, you know, maybe you got to a place where you could hire people somewhat efficiently, or you found like some rock stars. But like, I feel it'd be safe to assume that most people have hired somebody who has encountered some sort of just complete debacle, right? Like you took the wrong person, and they're like, retrospectively, there were things that you could have done way differently and you probably should have been, but like, maybe like your need to fill the role, or your desire just to get somebody in because you were so beat down by interviewing 7 other people, and it's like, fuck, I just need to get somebody in this seat. Influence your decision to make a poor decision, and then you look back and you're like, yeah, the writing was all over the wall. Red flags were waving all in front of my face, and it's I'm reflecting. It's good. It's good. Okay, so like now we get candidates, right? They make it through, and we've got X amount of people that move past into like the interview process. What does that look like? Is it a one interview process? Should it be 2 interviews? Should it be a panel interview? Like, what ideally, and I'm sure context matters a bit here as well, what should that look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, it depends on how many openings there are first. If it's just one position, like a production manager versus sales reps where you can hire multiple people, it's a different strategy there. So, I mean, you do your one-on-one interview, which is typically 45 minutes to an hour. And also depends on how big the company is. So, if the sales manager is doing the interview and then they want to get the final sign-off for the owner, what I like to do is just have that being done in the same day. Of, okay, we're going to have your interview. It's going to be an hour. And then after this, I'm gonna introduce you to the owner and have him talk to you for a few minutes. So like one trip coming into the office, like it needs to be quick. The hiring process has to be quick. So if you're gonna do 2 interviews, then I'd want to do them like really quickly back to back while that person is in there, and don't go introduce them to the owner if you know they're not gonna be a good fit. Like that's.
Be aware.
So, and I always say, like, okay, and we'll introduce you to the owner if he's free. And if it's not a good fit, you're like, oh, he's busy right now. Like, you're not going to take that person in there and introduce them. If the owner's not there and they want to do, like, a final follow-up interview, I guess you can do that. It just, the thing is speed. Because top people have about 5 interviews that week. So it really has to be a quick turnaround. Multiple interviews takes time.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that you're selling them on the value of being a part of your company. They're selling you on the value of them being part of your company, right? So it's this weird fucking tug of war. But it's like time kills deals, right? It's the same reason why you don't want to set a follow-up meeting on a sales call where somebody won't close a week down the road, because the enthusiasm is going to slowly deteriorate as that time passes. They're going to forget everything they were excited about. Like, that makes a lot of sense to me. All right, so make it a quick process.
Yeah. Yeah, it has to be quick, but it also has to be really effective. And so that's why, even in the interview process, we have specific interview questions that we've created for each position in a roofing company. These are the questions that you need to ask to figure out if it's going to be a good fit. We have a scoring system that you're going to rate these people on. So it's going to come out with a score that is going to predict the success of this person in your company. There's no more guesswork, like this scientific process that we created in our interviewing. So that really helps, especially if you're determining between multiple candidates. Then you're like, okay, we got 3 people that are going to be a production manager. This guy scored about a 50% on his interview, and this guy was a 90%. So it makes the decision making a lot more clear, especially if you're having to make your case to somebody higher up. Then, because typically what we have in an interview, what we come out with is a yes or a no, or we like them or we don't like them. But it's much more complex than that when you're talking about human behavior and predicting job success. So maybe it's their communication skills, or they haven't had customer service experience, or they're not necessarily service minded, or they're great at growth and personal development but may not be great at leading a team. So there's different factors that we can look at and not say yes or no, this person's great or they're not, but why. We need a story behind our decision. That's what having rating and questions and factors does, is provides a story for why we're hiring someone.
Man, okay, so I love that. I'm a big data guy myself. I like to use numbers to make decisions, because I think if you make emotional decisions, that can yield some pretty undesirable outcomes. But let me ask you this, right? So so I'm hiring, right? I've done all these interviews, and I've got somebody who rated a 75, and I got somebody who rated an 80. Or let's say 85 and 90. One's an 85, one's a 90, right?
Yeah.
I like the 85 better, because just in my heart of hearts, down in my gut, just the flow of the conversation, their energy, right? The level of comfortability with them. Do I go with the 85 in that situation?
It's not. I think that you would go by the factors that you're going to be rating them on. So if it's communication, professionalism, service, teamwork, leadership, you're going to go with the factors that are most important to you. So maybe someone who hasn't had customer experience before, it's not as important for this job. Maybe you want to rate or put more weight on leadership, or put more weight on professionalism. But it doesn't mean that you have to pick always the one with the highest score. It just means that you have a way to compare people across aspects of the job.
Interesting.
And a lot of times, after so many interviews, you're like, I know we like this guy more than the other, but I don't know why. So having different factors that we're rating, you can clearly look back at the sheet and be like, of course, this is why I liked him. Because he's got excellent, leadership skills. I like the way he answered this question versus, Bobby over here answered this question. So that's in my brain. That is why I'm making this decision. But, I mean, you still can't, just completely go away from your gut instinct. That's there for a reason. And there's some things that data just doesn't capture. And I don't think you can just, dismiss that. But it's when you have multiple people that are making a hiring decision, arguing over gut feelings is not as effective as is arguing over specific reasons why. Have you had that happen or something?
Argue, bunch of people arguing over gut feelings. Oh man. Why do, if there was a list, or maybe there's one, or there's several that you've seen, like, why is retention just always an issue?
Yeah. I think one, it's like the nature of the industry in roofing. It just is a high turnover industry. And that's what we're dealing with. So it's, if when you look at like turnover in roofing versus turnover in like corporate sales, or um, even like, IT, or other industries, it just is a naturally high turnover industry. So, I mean, we're not starting on an even playing field with other
Sure.
industries. We're just not. Um, Retention, a lot of people that are attracted to like 1099 positions, or the trades positions, tend to like job hop more, or not like see it as a career opportunity, just like a
Sure.
job. Um, yeah.
So, if let's assign percentages. Let's play with some numbers here. We're gonna do a little exercise. It's gonna be fun. So, if we had to assign a percentage to, okay, it's just we're a victim of circumstance. I'm a company owner and I'm fighting retention issues, right? One side of it's I'm a victim of circumstance, and the other side of it's like, fuck, I gotta look in the mirror because I'm not doing shit the right way. Like, if we're assigning percentages to those two things, what does that look like in your mind, based off your experience?
So you're saying what part of company owners are like playing the victim
No,
versus
just
what?
like some, like you said, by just the in roofing, it's inherently susceptible to high turnover for the reasons that you talked about, right? So, like, I feel like those things are somewhat uncontrollable. And then I think that there's other things that are a breakdown, that are breakdowns in different systems, processes, what have you, internally, that completely can be controlled and should be controlled, right? So I'm just kind of curious in your mind of like what percentage of those things are just, they're inherently part of roofing, and this percentage of retention issues are attributed to things that we can't control, and this percentage of things are attributed to things that we can control.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. I don't know that I have like an exact percentage, but I will say that no one's like a victim of circumstances. These are the circumstances, but we all have an ability to change them. And that's really why I have a company in the first place, is to do everything we can to retain people. So, like having benefits and a 401k, that's a great way to retain people. Getting the right people from the jump that want a career and having a career path, that's how you're going to retain people. Making it look and feel like a professional environment rather than just everyone's like running around and fighting fires. Continually developing leaders, because a lot of people leave their managers and not companies. So, like, you're really being proactive in developing systems and leaders and culture. That's going to lead to retention. But I do think that people have to put more effort in trades-based companies than they naturally would in other corporate companies.
It's a really good answer. I've got another question for you. Bet you didn't see that coming. How important or unimportant is a company's brand as it relates to hiring and retaining people?
Yeah, it's super important. So 68% of applicants, before they apply for a job, they go to the website of the company. I mean, and if the company doesn't have a professional website, they don't apply. So, I mean, that's the first thing. Yeah. That's 68% is what the research shows, is the very first impression on an applicant is the website. So your branding is everything. And we focus so much on customer branding, but we also need to do employer branding. So everyone needs to have a careers page on their website that has a hype video about the team, that talks about the different positions, that has the job descriptions where applicants can apply right online and schedule their own interview there, and just engagement. If that's the first place they're going, then we need to engage them right then by having, like, in big letters on the website, careers.
A hype video. I like that.
Yeah, like what it's like to work here. And people, what we want to do is, like, when we're building relationships with the applicants, we're also building that emotional engagement. So by the time we talk to them on the pre-screen, they're already excited about the opportunity. By the time they come into the interview, and even when you're scheduling an interview, because we use Calendly to schedule interviews, so it sends reminders. In that Calendly link is the hype video. So we're creating an emotional engagement with these people before they get into the interview. And that's going to reduce the number of no-shows. I mean, there's so many benefits of just engage. Just like you would put all the effort in for customers, it's the same type of deal up front with employees.
Yeah, I could see how that would be really important. And it's like, I can also see how, like, as a business owner, you're in your business every single day. You know everything about your business. You know your employees. You know who this person's going to be working with. Guess what, guys? They have no fucking idea about any of this stuff, right? So they have no idea what they're walking into. So, like, if you remove yourself from the situation of knowing everything about it, it's the same way, like, if you're talking with a homeowner. Don't assume your homeowner knows about the roof that you're going to put on. There should be an education process. They should be excited, right?
Yeah.
And it's incumbent upon you to get them excited, right? And you do that a bit differently for the consumer and for a prospective employee. But I could see the parallel and how that could be so important. That's amazing. Yeah, you're just teaching me, dropping tons of knowledge. Forever grateful. When does a company need to create their core values? Yesterday?
Yeah, like from when you're first starting the company, it's super important because that's going to be driving the culture. So your core values, and they'll probably change year after year. I know that my core values as a company have evolved over the years, but like when you're first starting your company, that's the time to do it, to be really intentional. A lot of company owners are starting with, like, great intentions, but they don't remain intentional. And those core values are what guide your moral compass throughout the years of doing business.
We're gonna have to quote that. Great intentions, but not remaining intentional. Damn, that's good. I like that. Yeah, for real. Okay. So they're going to evolve. Like, okay, so let me ask you this. How do we get away from it just being like your core values turning into fucking live, laugh, love on the wall, right? That people see and they're like, just scoff because it's like, yeah, this is meaningless. This is just some basic shit, right? Like, no, it's not a guiding principle of the company. It's not anything that anyone exercises or believes in. It's just there, right?
Yeah, so you have to define what that means. And we have a process that we work with company owners on. So, like, one of our clients, it's Oberg Roofing. One of their core values is the future is ours. Like, that's one of their core values. And that's great, but that's open to interpretation. So we have it, like, clearly defined in writing what that means. Is, like, I don't have the exact definition, but it's like we are innovative, we disrupt the market, we seek to grow on a quarterly basis, and give back to future generations. So it's, like, really defined what each of those core values mean.
That's interesting. By the way, shout out to Caleb. I love that guy. I met him down at the World's Greatest Roofer event with EuroShield down in Florida, and we got to talk, and he came out and shot an episode. He's fucking awesome. Yeah.
He is, yeah. We've been working with him for about 6 months now, and he's one of the most innovative business owners that I've ever worked with. just the ideas that he has, how he embraces technology, his like consistent processes, even from like using a catch-all system to like the job cleanup to how they approach customers. It's just super systemized, and just like what he's really done over the past year he's doubled his revenue the past 2 years, and he's committed to taking his leadership team with him as they grow. So he's hired us to help coach and build and direct his leaders so that they can be ready for the next levels. A lot of roofing company owners don't do that or don't even think of doing that. It's like, okay, as we grow, we'll get more qualified people and bring them in. But he's really committed to growing his internal team, which I feel like speaks volumes of him and the culture that he's created.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to invest in those people, right? As opposed to bringing, I mean, I hate to put it in like a negative, something has a negative connotation, but it's like better the devil you know than the one that you don't. Like, if you know you've got good people, right, and they can be better, you have to put your ego to the side, right, and know that you're not necessarily best suited. And it might not be that you're not able to develop them into amazing leaders. You probably don't have the time if you're running a business, right? Like, so knowing when to delegate, when to bring somebody else in and put that on their plate so you can continue to, like, if you've got a recipe that's working, right, as you grow your company, you should keep doing the things that have been working very well for you and just keep proportionally increasing that recipe, not go and blow up the fucking recipe once you hit 5 million because whatever, right? All right, I digress. Yeah. But anyhow, there was, in that last 56 minutes, so much good shit, but I want to know more about you. So let's talk. I say it all the time. I'm a big Journey guy, right? And not the band, although they're pretty cool too. But like, I like to hear the story. Like, how did you you were brought into a construction family, and now you're here. What does that gap look like?
Yeah. So I mean, I'm from a super small town, Jolton, Tennessee. It's in the middle of nowhere. Well, it's actually about 15 minutes north of Nashville, but it's still in the middle of nowhere, which is very confusing because like the most exciting thing that's happened there in the last 5 years was a Taco Bell. Like that was the thing. Like we have like Tractor Tuesday where people drive their tractors to school. It's just like you could take your horse through the drive-through. I mean, well, now they changed the policy so you can't take your horse through the drive-through.
Son of a bitch.
Sanitary issues with it. That was like the big news on the feed. I like to follow like the small town feed, and it keeps me connected. Where like yesterday there was a thing on the feed like Granddaddy's chicken overcharged by $1, and then you got like Bertha and everybody coming out, Junior and Bubba, and just so like funny. Granddaddy's is the best chicken. Okay, so like I'm from like the humble beginnings, like super small town, and definitely feel like that's what's made me like have like strong work ethic and family values, and like a lot of the things that I learned there still stick with me. But it also taught me what I didn't want to be like either, because I felt like there's a lot of like closed-mindedness, and I always came up with things like new ideas and like better ways to do things, and always like bucking the system. And I was kind of always told no, like you need to like get back in your place, especially because I was a woman, and I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church, and women just didn't have the same place in the church, or definitely like are taught to be like more submissive in the way that I grew up. So I mean, it was good that it taught me a lot of values, and also it was good because it gave me the motivation to want to do bigger and better things beyond there.
So middle of nowhere, 15 minutes from Nashville. It seems like those two things are contradictory, but after you explaining,
right,
it makes a lot of sense. I would love to take a horse. Well, anywhere. I don't think I've ever ridden a horse, but to take one through a drive-thru would be fucking epic. So if you hear of any places that still allow it, let me know, because I'm gonna go check it out.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no chain grocery stores, there's no anything, which is so amazing because people like don't leave the small town to go to Nashville. They just don't. It's like a farm place. It is just really mind blowing how it can be so close to the city and so like its own culture.
It's interesting because, you know, in fifth grade, I grew up in the city of Buffalo, and then I got moved out with my father, which I didn't want to do because he lived like 20 minutes away in it's more than suburban. It was rural. It doesn't sound like as remote as what you were talking about, but very similar. And, you know, the people, the way that people act and the way that they are, and even like the culture, like, here's the thing, when I grew up, it's like, if you wanted to go play with your friends and we want to play football, guess what? I'm going and banging on Mike's door at 7 a.m. Mike's not up yet, come back in an hour, bang, 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 until he was up, and then we'd play football all day, and it was great. But like, I had culture shock, right? Because people dress differently. The norms, like the customary norms, were so much different. Like, I went and knocked on somebody's door without calling, and I got fucking roasted by his parents. Like, what? You don't just come here and knock on my door. And I'm like, what? I just want to play basketball. I don't understand. Yeah, so it was very interesting. So yeah, I guess the disparity between the two is worth discussing. But anyhow, okay. So you grew up there, and then where did you go to school? What was your upbringing like outside of church?
Yeah. So I did like played all types of sports, like boys tackle football. I mean, I was just like, you know, very tomboy, black belt in karate. I have 5 brothers, like, just very, like, you know, tomboy. And, until I discovered boys, and then I became, like, a cheerleader, because I thought that's what they wanted. Yeah, and I was a cheerleader in, high school, college, and then, pro after that. So, I did that, and then, went to like a small Christian school for college. I got in trouble in high school, so I kind of got chipped there. And yeah, and then got my master's degree, and then I worked for like 6 months, and I was like, this is so stupid. You have to go and make money, and then you bring it home, and then you have to give it to other people. You have to like follow rules and like talk about the weather, and I was like, this is not for me. So I was like, oh, I'll get a PhD, and then I can like go back to school and take out monopoly money called student loans. So I thought that was a great plan, and I guess it is. So I went back and got my PhD, and then I taught at Clemson while I was getting my PhD. And then I moved to Florida to work at Publix supermarkets at the headquarters, and I ran all of the hiring processes there. They're a $2 billion company, and I learned just like so much from there about culture, about hiring people, about retention. I mean, that's really what shaped a lot of my ideas about how I approach contractors, is working at that company, which was an amazing experience there. Yeah. Then I got fired. I switched jobs to a tech firm and got fired, and I just like lost motivation at work. I just always wanted to start my own business, and I was just half-assing it at work, and got fired. And then my dad was like, oh, come to this roofing conference. I'm like, okay. And then yeah, and then I was like, okay, I'll go. And then I started my business at that roofing conference and signed on my first client, and it's been a lot of ups and downs. That first year was like, I had the worst anxiety and just like crying all the time, and like just sick to my stomach. My first year in business, I was sweeping floors with people that got out of prison, like a temp labor job. I was working to try to like pay my bills, which I couldn't pay. And it just finally like started clicking about like 6 months to 9 months in, started being able to like get clients and figure out what I'm doing. And it's been like 2.5 years
Yeah,
now.
that's amazing. First year, I feel like for a lot of business can be gut-wrenching, riddled with anxiety. So
Yeah, I'm like, what am I doing? Am I qualified to do this? Are people even going to think I'm smart? Am I smart? Did I accidentally get a PhD? Like, maybe I just faked it my whole life. Like, just
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's
every
like
question.
self-doubt's a real thing, right? And we all go through it, and some people will never talk about it, but like there's usually going to be moments where somebody's like, they sit back and they're like, and you second guess yourself, right? And it's natural, but so how did you find your way through that? What were some effective coping mechanisms, I guess, like if someone's experienced that type of self-doubt to push through?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say it's like I leaned on people in the industry whenever I wanted to quit. Like Matt Mulholland, he, I like basically like cried. It was like Matt Mulholland and Doug Quinn and TJ Ware. We're in like a circle, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, this is just too much. And they're all like, no, you can do it. Just give it some more time. Like, you can't quit. What you're offering is super valuable. And so I just kind of like was super vulnerable with people in the industry, and then they encouraged me, and that's really how I got through it. Is leaning on them. I feel like they believed in me before I believed in myself.
Yeah, and I mean to have like a strong support system, I think is really important. And like that vulnerability you talk about, like that's equally important because what do they call it in psychology? Catharsis, engaging in cathartic behavior and talking about your deep emotions and how much better you feel after that. Is that right? Am I pulling from my Psych 101 brain accurately? I think it's something like that. I might be wrong, but I feel like I remember that conversation pretty vividly. I'm like, yeah, that does make sense because when I talk to people about shit that's bothering me, like I do feel better about it afterwards. Isn't that something? Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad that you pushed through. Was that
Yeah, me too.
was that like as far as like adversity that you've experienced in life? What has been, I guess, the most adverse set of circumstances that you've had to push through, whether it be in life, personally, professionally? What does that look like?
Yeah. So, my mom got cancer when I was 7, and she had cancer my whole life after that until she passed away. And so I kind of got branded as like the girl whose mom was dying. And that was kind of like, and I used that kind of like to manipulate people and to get what I want and to get attention. And I just like developed this kind of victim mentality. Um, and I also have a brother with special needs. He has autism. And, you know, after my mom died, I was pretty much like a primary caregiver. I was his advocate. I just really stepped in a big way in his life, and I was very young doing that. So that really taught me like a ton of compassion. It also like brought out unhealthy coping mechanisms like alcohol, um, and it definitely shaped me in good ways and not so good ways. And so after my mom passed away, I was adopted, and that family is amazing. That's who I call my mom and dad today. Um, and they have a roofing company, Music City Roofers, and that's been an incredible experience. I'm definitely like part of the family. Like I'm talk to them, you know, not every day because they're my parents. They get on my nerves sometimes, but like not everybody gets an opportunity to have another family. Like I was very lucky that I never went without a mom or dad. Like I always like had love, and I feel like that definitely saved me because I was on just a really bad path and just kind of like dealing with the uncertainty of who's going to take care of me, and that created just like a lot of drive in me and a lot of independence in me that like I knew I wanted to make a life for myself. I knew I wanted to make enough money to be able to support my brother. I knew that like through all of the circumstances that like I wasn't a victim. And I learned that it doesn't really matter what life presents, and it's not like a why me, because everybody has their own stuff. everybody has their own unique challenges, but it's more about like how I'm going to respond to that. Like I could just develop like this sense of anger and be mad at the world. I could continue drinking. I could, there's endless possibilities of the way that I could take the direction of my life. And I chose to like love myself and to love others. And that's really like why I have this business, is because I'm uniquely qualified to help roofing company owners. Everything in my life has set this path to be able to help this industry. And I'd feel this like deep sense of purpose when I'm approaching my work and wanting to be able to inspire other people that are suffering, wanting to be able to be that like listening ear and psychologist, and wanting them to like create their own sense of purpose and their own sense of success like I was able to create.
Wow. Well, first and foremost, I'm sorry about your mother. That had to be incredibly challenging, and that's amazing for you to step up, especially at a young age, and help your brother and be his advocate, because it's for obvious reasons. I can't imagine how challenging that had to be. So.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was, and it made me grow up super fast, and I had a lot of resentment about that for years. But, at 35 and having like my own business and being able to accomplish the things that I've done at such a young age, I don't think would have happened unless I was forced to grow up super quick. So I feel like everything, like all the good things in my life have come from like overcoming things that weren't so good that were presented to me.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I've made some terrible choices in my past, and you want to talk about ineffective coping? I don't know that there's a less effective coper than me at 20 years old. And I think it's good to talk about that stuff, right? It's one of those things where people talk about mental health. Well, they don't talk about mental health, and I think it's important to kind of shine a light on these types of things, because it's like you mentioned it too, right? Like when shit hits the fan, and whether you're 15 years old, 20 years old, 30 years old, 40 years old, like the importance of acknowledging that like you could benefit from help, right? And whether that's a friend, whether that's a psychotherapist, or whether that's some sort of group, right, support group, right? Like, man, I was never really taught growing up the value of those things, right? Like my exposure to help when I was young was like, you're wild as fuck, we're going to a shrink and we're putting you on Ritalin. Like, swear to God, right? Like, and we did like art therapy like for 1 or 2 times with this like shrink, I remember, and it's like, yeah, this dude needs Ritalin, right? So I took Ritalin my entire life, like as a kid. But like never really, like my parents never really taught me like it's okay not to be okay, and like if you feel like you're not okay, like this is probably how you should handle it. Like my dad was an alcoholic. Loved him to death, but the dude was a raging alcoholic. Like, it is what it is, right? Weirdly enough, I became an alcoholic, and it's not his fault. It's my, that was my dealings, my issues. But I think it's really easy to fall into that wayward path of very self-harming coping. What was, how did you recognize that? Because it's easy to point to someone else, right? And like, if you have a friend or a colleague, and it's like, this dude's fucked up. He's a waste case. Like, he needs help, right? It's easy to point a finger and see that shit in somebody else. I feel like it's a lot harder, like when it's the person in the mirror that's got the issue. So was there like an aha moment or a moment of clarity where you're like, I gotta get my shit together?
Yep. And that came from the assistance of law enforcement.
Shout out the boys in blue.
Yeah, I got pulled over for 3 DUIs. I got out of all of them, but my last DUI, I was drinking and driving the next day. Like, nothing had happened. And I knew at that point that I had, like, a major issue, and I went to AA 8 years ago and never drank again after that. But I wasn't willing to do anything about it until like I got in trouble, and like I just knew my life was going to be over. Like I would either like kill somebody or end up in jail at the rate I was going. Like just drinking every day. I had a bottle under my car, just under my front seat, just very like so super like physically dependent on alcohol. And I was in college all those years, so I just was like, oh well, I'm in college. But it's like, no, you've been in college for 10 years getting a PhD. That's different than a 19-year-old at a frat house. Um, so I recognize that with the help of law enforcement. And I went to AA, and I never drank again. It's been about 8 years.
Congratulations,
8 years.
that's incredible. That's not easy at all. Whether you needed the assistance or not, right? Like like we at some point we all need somebody, and in that moment, that's who you needed. So it's all good. And look at you now.
And here I am.
I mean, I had two of those moments. So once when I was like, I don't know, I think I was like 21 or 22, I was hooked on opiates, and I overdosed, and I was in an ambulance, and it's like, holy shit, like I might be dying right now. So that was eye-opening, and I stopped opiates, and I started drinking, right, a lot, and one crutch to the other. And I thought about it, and my daughter, at the time, my daughter's 15 now, which is awesome and terrifying. Love her to death. But, she's like 9 at the time, I think, and I'm like, I just started thinking about her life, right, as I'm, all fucked up. And I'm like, I can't wait to be a granddad someday and to walk her down the aisle. And then I'm like, it kind of just hit me that, like, dude, you're drinking, like, I don't know, 12, 15 beers a day, a bottle of liquor. It's like, dude, you're going to be fucking dead by the time you're 40, and you're not going to see any of this shit, right? So it's like, you should probably reevaluate what you're doing and fix it. So, yeah, it was, I feel very fortunate to be here at this point and be having this conversation. But, yeah, I think that, I don't know, for people that are struggling with any type of, whether it's mental illness, addiction, compulsion, like, I don't know. I made a post about, like, I would love to have somebody on that talks specifically about this and deals in these things every day. Have you found something that's been a part of your process daily, routinely, in some capacity that's helped you sustain to get to that 8 years?
Yeah, I mean, I go to AA. And I like AA because it like you just put $1 in the basket, and it's like free therapy and a support network and a sponsor and just kind of all the tools that come with it. I mean, that's what's worked for me because it's super easy and structured. I can just show up. But I think a lot of other people can find healing in nature or like meditation and prayer or like religion or just family support. And I think there's a lot of ways that change can happen. And for me, AA is just way easier because it's just like there's meetings everywhere, and I can just go, and it costs $1 in the basket. So that's what's worked for me. But there's tons of ways that definitely don't have the monopoly on recovery. There's tons of ways to get sober and to stay sober.
Yeah, I could see how like the convenience of that makes it very attractive and easy, right? And it's $1. It's amazing, right? $1.
Right.
I mean, what else can you get for $1 these days? I mean, not much. Not much. I like that. So where do you...
Even the dollar
I
store
know. Can you
$25
believe
now.
that shit?
That's like 25% markup.
It's like, I mean, your brand can't be the dollar store and be, I mean, Dollar General we have here, and it's like, most things are like $5 now. It's like, talk about a bait and switch.
Yeah. Dollar Tree, it's like, I like Dollar Tree a lot though. Even with the 25% markup, I'm a huge Dollar Tree fan.
Fucking Dollar Tree. That's amazing. So where do you see... Give me a fun fact about you that not a lot of people know. I did this with Adam Sand, and I loved it. So you've got I got a tough act to follow.
I mean, I studied classical piano. I lived in Austria. Studied at the Mozarteum.
Oh shit! What was that like?
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, just like the love for music over there is just, you can just feel it. Like when you're in like the older buildings, when you're in like the cathedrals, when you're in just the environment, even in the street, it's just like this love and passion for the arts and music. Like being in Salzburg, Austria was just an incredible experience. And studying at the Mozarteum, which is, you know, like one of the most prestigious music schools, it was, I mean, it was incredible. I loved that experience.
How long were you there for?
6 months.
It gives me anxiety thinking about going to like a foreign country like that. I don't know, maybe I've seen too many shitty movies where it's like, you know, I'm going to get abducted and I'm going to end up in, you know, getting the shit beat out of me and my passport stolen and stuck there. But, God, that's, yeah, I love the idea of being there. I don't love the idea of getting there. I'm also terrified of flying. Like, so overseas flights kind of freak me out. Just,
Did you fly to Orlando?
And I hated it.
Well, I mean, Adam just drives his van everywhere.
Maybe
So.
I'm gonna hop on the Adam wave, hop in the van. The problem is like I equally despise driving around mountains. Like being up in the mountains, like really freaks me out. Especially like you look over and it's like, yeah, just 1,000-foot drop off, no big deal. So I don't know what's worse, honestly. We drove to Florida once, like 10 years ago, and it was. That had to be worse than flying, because I mean, I feel like 8-10 hours through Pennsylvania, Virginia. You're in mountains. Maybe it was less than that, but it felt like years that I was stuck in this mountain, just driving around a mountaintop. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So Austria, that's okay. Wow, I didn't see that coming. That's pretty dope. Where do you see the industry going? Like, are there like changes that you see? Is there something like an impact that you want to make with your company to kind of revolutionize like the way people are recruiting or the way they're running their business? Like, what kind of impact do you want to leave on the roofing industry or make?
Yeah, so I think shifting the mindset of like people first, profit guaranteed. Just understanding that people are your only unique resource in your company. Everyone else can use the same technology, the same shingles, but the only real difference that a company has is the people it employs. So having company owners really understanding that and invest in their people. I think that's when we're talking about like retention, when we're talking about company growth. I mean, it all comes back to like investing in your people.
So I could just give them like a Christmas card with $250 in it, and that's investing in them, right? That's it. It's that simple.
I mean, that's the key right there. Not quite, but
good start. I mean,
that's, I probably would do that as like a little Christmas bonus.
Yeah, I don't know. Like people I feel like it's the culture, right? Everyone talks about culture, and I think it's wildly important for a lot of different aspects of the company, right? But overall, like I don't know, money attracts talent, culture retains it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like culture attracts talent too, especially if you're doing like employee referrals.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Like when people are recruiting their friends.
They might have a referral bonus attached to bringing their friend in, though, right? Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, but if it's a good person, no one wants to bring somebody else into a shitty company for $1,000. Be like, oh, this is ruin my best friend's life for $1,000.
What about 1,500?
I mean, maybe.
Yeah, how much do I have to pay you to bring you in? bring your friends into this company so that they hate you. God, that's interesting. Yeah, culture can definitely attract talent as well. That's, man. All right, sweet. So, this was amazing. I had so much fun.
Yeah, it was awesome getting to know
What
you
question?
better and
What questions do you have for
here.
me? Ask anything.
Well, how long do you mainly work with roofers, and how did you get into like the contracting
Yeah, so
space?
we have about 35 clients, 34 of which are roofers. One was a referral from a roofer we work with, and pest and lawn management company out of Memphis, Tennessee. We went and visited them a couple months ago. I did a 3-mile run in July in Memphis, and I thought I was gonna die. I don't know how runners in Memphis do it. It was fucking hot. So I tip my proverbial hat to all you Memphian runners. Would it be Memphians? Is that okay?
I think so.
All right. Well, if it's not, I'm sorry. Please don't get upset with me. My dad was in contracting. He did roofing specifically and predominantly, and I watched, and that was back when phone books were huge, right? Like they just fucking buy a 2-page ad in a phone book. It'll be great. Interestingly enough, in some places the phone book still does work. So we'll leave. That's a hot take. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I've
Maybe in Jolton.
in Buffalo.
Maybe in
I've got a
small
client
town.
that gets a couple hundred calls a year out of the phone book. Hand to God.
Wow.
So, but that's one of those things where it's like it seems unbelievable, but I've substantiated it does happen. So, but anyway, those were much simpler times way back then. But nowadays, it's like when I started out of college, I got into sales and marketing, and for me, I found early on that a lot of people, regardless of how well it's working, don't want to believe their marketing is working. So for me, it was really important to be able to prove value, and that becomes really challenging when you're dealing with customers that deal on lifetime value, right? So if you own a hair salon, or if you own a restaurant, or even like a dental practice, and it's like you're not just doing like cosmetics, and it's like, I brought you 3 patients that came in for cleanings, or I sold you 7 tacos from these 3 customers. It's like, okay, great, I made $9. Fantastic. It's very hard to prove value on that type of model when you're a marketing company. So like roofing, I had a lot of familiarity with from my family, and like just the personality. I feel like there's really good continuity between my energy and my personality and roofing contractors. I love them.
Yeah, that's
it's not all like tight knocked and like it's fun. So you couple that with the fact that like I can prove on acquisition, right? Like you sold this roof from this ad, it came from us. You see value in working with me because you're making money, and we can kind of see that all the way through. Like that's the type of conversation I want to have. So it's kind of it was multifaceted, the recipe of why I got here, but that those are the ingredients that were involved.
Yeah, that's cool. It's kind of a similar story to me then.
You got anything else? I skipped second grade.
Why?
Yeah.
What?
So part of me being like a wild, like hyper kid was like, all right, so we're gonna put him on Ritalin. And, well, since that didn't work, right, and he's like still distracting everyone, like maybe we just challenge him more. So we're gonna skip a grade. So when that didn't work, they just doubled down on the Ritalin. Swear to God. So that's my fun fact. Sorry. Yeah.
That's funny. I mean, it's not funny, but so why like the rocket ship? Like why Ascend? How did you come up with that?
So for me, it's like if I'm working with a company, that's what I want them to do is ascend above the rest of their competition, right? And like I thought of this like 6 years ago. The company's like a year and a half, going on 2 years old. So it was always like I knew the name. That was always the name, but I never had known like what I wanted to do, like brand wise or anything like that. And one day I was just sitting there, and I'm like the furthest thing from like creative, like an artistic person. I think they would say I'm right-brained, and like the left side of my brain has suffered severe trauma and just doesn't work. Or backwards, left brain, not whatever. At any rate, I can't draw worth shit, but I sketched out the Ascend logo the one night. I was sitting there sick, and I was just like, yeah, and then I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. I'm like, and for the end, it's going to be a rocket ship, right? And, I got it to a graphic designer. I'm like, I fucking love that, right? So it's like, results are out of this world. And there's just so much fun shit that you can do around like a cosmic brand, right? With like a rocket ship and take my email, takeoff with Ascend. Right? It's like, yeah. So I don't have a perfect answer as to why exactly, but that's kind of how we got to where we are today.
I feel like our logos would be good, or our names, Ignite and it.
I love when I was typing your email. I'm like, I fucking love the name Ignite. Like it creates a sense of like in me that like, it gets me excited. Yeah. So kudos to you.
I feel like that's an event we should do coming up. Ignite.
Let's do it.
Ascend.
It'll be like.
You have to ignite the rocket before it can extend.
That's a fact.
Yep.
All right, one more question. What's one more question you want to ask me? No holds barred. You can ask me anything. But you don't have to if you've got nothing.
So, how do you handle like your daughter going on dates with boys?
So the coffee I'm drinking today is proudly served by Bean Bastard here in Buffalo, New York. If you ever want some good coffee, go to Bean Bastard. No, that's a really good question. So it was one of those, not well. Is that an acceptable answer? I don't deal with it well. So it's funny because this recently, she started having conversations with a boy, and like they were like, you know what, we want to be boyfriend and girlfriend. And I'm like, well, do you now? Let's talk about it. I try to be very at least I want an open dialogue with my child, right? I want you to feel comfortable talking to me, and whether or not they do, and what it looks like to get to that point, I think looks different for me and her, and right. But with that being said, she came to me and we had the conversation, and we came up with a strategy. We had a plan, and it's like, okay, you guys can hang out outside of school under the supervision of your mother, and it's very the ground rules are as such. If you guys are hanging out, you're staying in the living room, and you guys can watch TV, you can watch a movie, just hang out, and we'll do that for 4 months. And if you guys don't hate each other by then, and you still want to hang out, then we'd be open to having a conversation as far as what the next steps look like.
Okay. Yeah. So supervised dating.
We did it. Supervised visitation. We tried to make it very clear, no titles, no dating, no boyfriend, no girlfriend. It's you guys are friends and you're hanging out. We understand that there's a curiosity, right, to be more than that. Let's run a pilot program and see how this plays out. Yeah.
Conditional employment.
Yeah, so it's
I think that's smart.
There's so many things in life where it's you just scratch your fucking head because you have no idea what the right answer is, right? And especially as it relates to parenting, I'm like, God damn it. And it was funny because, this kind of got sprung. I was at the gym playing basketball, and her mother, we're not together. We haven't been in a long time, but we have a great relationship. Her mother and her were doing Zumba. So I was walking out of the basketball court, and Georgia came up. She's like, "Hey, Dad, can I talk to you for a minute?" And just sprung this on me, all of a sudden. I was like, "What?" I'm like, "Hold on a second, let me catch my breath." Yeah, so I don't know if it's the right way to handle it, but here's the thing: kids are gonna be kids, right? And they're gonna, I'm like, I don't know, my thought is what am I gonna do? Tell you no? You can't talk to a boy at 15 years old. What's that? You're gonna be jumping out of your window.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen younger women do it, right? I'm not gonna name names, but I do have a sister, and I love her to death. So it's I don't know, you just do your best. Do your best, and hopefully it works out. And I mean, she's a really good kid, so we've got that going. And when I drop her off at school, when I get the opportunity, I'm like, just make good choices today. Just make good choices. So, yeah. Yep. So let me ask you this: if somebody wanted to talk to you about what exactly, let's talk full spectrum real quick, everything that Ignite does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we engage with contractors in a couple different ways. One of the ways is doing like full consulting, where we would come in for a year with the company. Typically those contractors are around 4 million and up that are looking to like double their revenue, get more time back. Kind of those are our bigger clients where we'll come in and work with them on a yearly basis. And we go through everything from building out processes and roles and responsibilities and training and onboarding and recruiting. I mean, like the whole gamut of like strategy and KPIs and, finance, and just really going through everything, but we don't do marketing. So I always like to make that disclaimer, like we're not a marketing firm. And so we engage with contractors like that, or we have our university, our recruiting and retention university, where we provide all of the tools that we've created to contractors that they can buy the tools, and an academy that teaches them how to use it. So that includes like all your new hire paperwork, your career path, your interview questions, your screening guide, role play of what it should look like when you're interacting with a candidate, every communication you should send to a candidate, all of the objections you may get in the process. I mean, so really like in detail, like step-by-step process to master your hiring and onboarding. So those are really the two ways we work with them.
Gotcha. So if somebody wanted to talk to you about you helping their business, how would they go about doing so?
Yeah, so they would like call me at, should I give
Drop
my
your
number?
number, email.
It's Jessica at Ignite. Yeah, it's Jessica at igniteresults.net, and our website is igniteresults.net, and also like find me on Facebook. I spend way too much time on there, so it's good to connect with me on there as well. And I'm super open to really like helping contractors. I love talking to them and providing any type of value, even if they don't decide to work with me. I'm not like a hard sale type person, so I'm totally open for people just calling and chatting with me.
If you're a contractor that needs help with recruiting, if you need to grow and you want some time back and you want to make more money and do so in an efficient way, you heard it here first. Dr. Jessica said slide in the DMs on Facebook, all right? Or you can visit the website, shoot her a message. This was so much fun.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you taking time out of your day. You shared so much value with the audience, and I'm sure they'll be equally appreciative for all the knowledge that you dropped today.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Talk soon.